Welcome to the fourth, I think, episode of my podcast, previously known as Ebby's Podcast. I think from now on shall be known perhaps as the Villagers Podcast, because my goal with this podcast is, of course, to encourage us all in our community, to help us feel like we're not alone, to help us feel supported, to draw on the knowledge of others that can inform us and help us to like build ourselves up just as we do in a village, even if we're far flung, even if we feel isolated, to help being a part of creating this kind of network, this digital village. A huge goal of mine is to have guests on this podcast, and I've just like had a funky couple of months, and that has just been foiled at every turn. I had one amazing guest on, and I had technical difficulties and lost the whole podcast. And then I have other people who I just really love, who I really want to talk to, and we're all mothers, and we're all busy, and we're all content creators, everyone that I've asked so far, and so it's just been difficult to like nail down times where we like both can do it. However, I'm powering ahead, and so I'm recording this one on my own, which I would like to do more of anyway, but it feels really strange. I feel a little bit like, what am I going to sit here and talk about for, 30, 45 minutes or plus that anybody will want to listen to? But I guess it's just my part of the village, and what do I have to share? And so part of this for me is just an exercise in like sharing and expressing and getting over myself, and also in like the manifestation of this podcast. Like, I believe in this idea and I want to see it through, so I'm just gonna keep going with it. I'm just gonna do it. I'm sitting out on my porch. The passion flower vine is blooming, which is really exciting. I think I'm gonna make some tea later. There's mosquitoes all around me and I fear it might rain. However, this is my favorite spot in the house. And if you hear any noise in the background, it is the boys all creating chaos in the house. And that's just reality. I have a little cup of tea here. And today, I really want to talk about the maiden-to-mother transition and what that's been like for me. Yesterday was Mother's Day, and if I was like a good influencer, I would have recorded this ages ago and then like released it in the lead up to Mother's Day, but we don't do all that around here. We fly by the seat of our pants. And so yesterday was Mother's Day, so I'm thinking about motherhood, and I often get asked questions about like how do you do this, like, or people say things like, I wish that I could be a mother. I don't think I'm going to be a good mother. Like, I would, if only I could be a mother like you, then maybe I would feel like I could have kids one day, or things to that ilk. I get a lot of comments like that. And I always try and respond to them, because I'm like, girl, same. Like, I actually really didn't want to be a mother. As horrible as that is to say, I didn't think I would be a good mother. I had a lot of, I had a lot of my own traumas and problems, but also a lot of like goals and dreams and desires that I didn't think that I could fulfill if I was a mom. And I also just, yeah, I objectively thought that like I wouldn't be a good mom. Which is funny to say now. Like, even my dad said, like, no offense, but I just like can't see you being a mom. My best friend who was just here, she was like, it's so funny because, when we met and, 5 years ago, I would not have thought of you being a mother. I just thought you're just like chilling. You were happy with your like married, no kids life. And I was. We were going to travel the world, and I just didn't know that I wanted to bring kids into it. But God had other plans, and kids wanted to come into my world, and so they did. And now I can truly happily say that I'm really so thankful for this journey, and it for me was a huge catalyst for major change in my life that I don't think everybody needs. Like, everybody has different catalysts for change, right? For me, becoming a mother was, I think, one of the most crucial, transformative things in my life, and it might have saved me. Like, it might have saved my life. Like, technically and like emotionally, spiritually. And so when I get these comments, or people kind of, I grasp that what people see is like, oh wow, you're such a great mom, like you were made to do this, like you probably always dreamed of this and you're so good at it, and I just don't think I would be. I can't imagine it. I probably shouldn't. I just like, it breaks my heart a little bit, because I'm like, for one, no, and for two, there's nothing wrong with you, and for three, it's totally fine, by the way, if you don't want to have kids. 110% fine. Or if you can't have children and your heart like yearns for it, like I truly don't believe that the only way to learn these lessons or to enter into kind of like the motherhood era, the motherhood archetype of your life is to have kids. I think that there are so many ways of doing that without having children, and some of the most like nurturing and mothering women that I know don't have their own children. And so take all of this with a pinch of salt because this is just kind of like my learnings and my journey. Um, and honestly, I don't have a very distinct plan for this. I just kind of wanted to talk it out. So if you're here for that, thank you and welcome. Becoming a mom, I think, is one of those in like so natural and so unnatural parts of life. Like in equal parts, you will never be prepared for motherhood, and like motherhood prepares you for itself and for life, you know, like it just kind of happens and you grow into it naturally, and at the same time none of us know what we're doing. Okay. Nobody does. Even the best moms and the moms that you like really look up to, they have major struggles. They might express them differently. There might be some like core things that kind of like center them and help them to like deal with the ebbs and flows of motherhood, which I will talk about at some point because I think there's some of those things that I've discovered along my journey. And there's definitely, I think, a difference between like you can be really floundering and struggling in motherhood, or you can be thriving in motherhood. But even if you're thriving, there's still going to be like really hard days and really major challenge. And so I just want to put that out there as a like baseline, you know, you will never feel prepared to become a mom. And if you do feel prepared to become a mom, if you're like one of those people that is like, I've waited my whole life for this, I've been dreaming and preparing for it and whatever else, you're probably not prepared either. And that might be even harder in a sense because you think it's going to be one way and then it might be a totally different way. I think that birth is one of the first places where we learn that. And in a sense, birth kind of is your first initiation, your like first trial by fire into all of the tenets of motherhood and like what that means and what that looks like. Again, you can become a mother without giving birth. There's a billion ways to become a mother. But this is from my experience, and there's something I feel like that happens through the pregnancy and birth like transformation that is like this kind of rite of passage into motherhood. And it kind of, I think, begins teaching you some of the things that you're gonna learn or you're gonna need for motherhood. I want to talk more about birth in a second, but first I want to introduce the idea of the female archetypes, which you've probably heard about. But I think it's a really beautiful picture of how all of us, regardless of exactly how our story presents itself, can tap into and take on aspects, like kind of cloak ourselves in these different personalities and these different seasons of womanhood at any point in our lives, right? And it can follow like a very natural progression, or at times you might dip back and forth into different archetypes of the feminine dependent on your season. And so there's this book called The Women's Wheel of Life, which I admittedly have not read all of. I'm terrible at reading the whole of a book. I don't know. I used to do it all the time. I used to just devour books, but then to be fair, I did not have social media or a phone or like access to even like a TV. But I was like the most avid reader probably until I was like 16. Oh, and then I also discovered partying a little bit. You know, things happened. And now I probably have like 6 to 10 books at any one given time that I'm reading. But like, for instance, I've been reading Braiding Sweetgrass by Robin Wall Kimmerer for like 3 years. Great book. Freaking love it. Anytime I pick it up, I'm like so inspired and amazed. It's really beautiful. It's about indigenous wisdom, particularly as it's expressed through plants and through connection to nature. It's incredible. But yeah, so when I'm like, oh, there's this amazing book you should read, I haven't read the whole thing. Okay? I've just read parts of it, or like heard things about it and then looked into it and then flipped through it and then whatever else. But so this all this to say, there's a lot of different iterations of the women's archetypes, the female archetypes, and kind of different traditions or different teachers kind of like teach them in different ways. But this is the one that I connect to the most, and it is from The Women's Wheel of Life, which is written by Elizabeth Davis. and Carol Leonard, they're midwives, and they have many years midwifery experience between them. And after meeting and talking with hundreds of women, they kind of developed these archetypes from their observations. Gosh, the mosquitoes are like attacking me. It's normal, it's fine. So I'll put this in like show notes. Is that a thing that I have? I don't know. But I'll try and put this in there so you can reference it. So they have like this wheel of the archetypes. All the archetypes are on the outside. They also display it with like moon phases kind of inside of that. And then at the center is this dark space called the transformer. And the transformer is kind of like a fallow season, a liminal space in between that you can kind of dip into at any point and emerge into or pull from any of the other archetypes in your life. So even though it might be normal to move through like maiden, mother, midwife, like chronologically through your life, at different points, dependent on your needs or your experiences or your traumas or whatever happens, you might like go into this kind of like dark space and then pull from or emerge as like a kind of different archetype dependent on what's happening. So I'm just going to quickly run through the archetypes because I think it's really fascinating and beautiful. So first we have the maiden season, which kind of the overarching theme is innocence. The daughter is the first archetype. The daughter is innocent. She's delighted by life, filled with wonder at the world, and full of promise. The maiden begins to blossom into her sexuality with the blood right of menses. She is alluring and growing in her autonomy. The blood sister begins her emergence into society and separation from family by bonding closely with other young women. Her blood right is first sex. And then we move into the mother season, which is nurturing. The mother season, you have the lover. She seeks unity, whether with a lover or a passion. Her discernment and clarity growing as she searches out an authentic life for herself. Then we have the mother. She is the creatrix. She surrenders to the mystery in order to bring forth the new, whether it be a child or a creative project or a business, a dream, you know. She nurtures it with all her heart. Her blood right is childbirth and or child death. And then you have the midwife. She is a mentor, a facilitator. She helps others do what she has now mastered through her surrender to the mystery. Then you have the matriarch season, which is power. You have the Amazon. With newfound freedom, her vitality grows. She is independent, wild, exploring. She is independent, wild, exploring sexuality and her masculine side. Then the matriarch leads with compassion by asking others to bring the best in themselves. She is non-competitive, secure in her harvest, and has reckoned with her failures. Her blood right is perimenopause. Then the priestess turns inward, turns toward her spirituality, away from the concerns of the material world. She descends into the inner realms to access wisdom from beyond. And finally, the crone season is wisdom. You have the sorceress. She wields her spiritual power wisely. She transmutes fear into love and is in service to love. Her blood right is menopause. The crone is the caretaker for society, a model of how to be through her humor, storytelling, and how she lives her life. I have said recently, I cannot wait to be a crone. I feel like I am a crone in training. I am just so excited to hit the point in life where I don't give many fucks, where I have long silver hair, a lot of wisdom, a lot of humor. I can just kind of be unabashedly myself and people will somewhat respect it, so long as I'm not a douche, you know, which I don't think I will be because I'm not the kind of person. I'm excited to hit the stage in life where I've like done a lot of the inner work and grown and matured and hit a sort of like easiness along with like a depth of wisdom where I can share easily with others and feel like I'm giving back, kind of, you know? I imagine myself wearing like lots of scarves and lots more jewelry than I do currently and lots more colors than I do currently and like weird shoes, you know? I'm excited for that. Finally, you have the Dark Mother. She is the gatekeeper of death. She midwives herself through this final transition. She distills the essence of life down to the bone with grace and dignity. And then in the center of it all is the transformer, the void, the mystery, the place we may go at any time of life when something needs to die and we need to be reborn. The place of darkness at the center of it all, where we are transformed into whatever needs to be next. We go into the transformer between death and birth, and whenever our soul calls for it. I think the beauty that we see here is all of these different iterations, these different expressions of womanhood, and how we can enter them a lot of different ways. And yeah, you can kind of move through them chronologically, but also sometimes you might like experience a major loss or a major newfound freedom or something and go back into the place of being like the daughter delighted by life filled with wonder, or of being like the midwife, you know, or the mother. Like, we aren't linear beings. We're very fluid and we have a lot of seasons. And I think that one of the best ways that we can find peace and find a kind of confidence in ourselves as women as we move through this life is a sort of reckoning with and learning to love all of these different seasons of ourselves. And that, yes, it can be frustrating when we keep changing, like our body keeps changing, our hormones keep changing, our feelings keep changing, but like it can also be a really beautiful thing. And like, if like as women we are like a river, you know, like you know the phrase, you never step in the same river twice. Like, so is the woman. Like, we are ever changing, and if you find yourself in an iteration of yourself that you're uncomfortable with, don't worry, girl. You're probably going to change either tomorrow or like next month or in a year from now for sure. You're going to be different. And that I think is like a pretty special woman thing. You know, I think in general, not to generalize, but in general, men are pretty consistent. They're pretty solid. I like to think of men as the tree that grows beside the river. You know what I mean? And they kind of grow up this way and their roots grow down that way and they grow out, but they're kind of in their same vein still for the most part. Take this all with a pinch of salt, you know, it's just my mind. But so, but I think that they're quite steady. You know, their hormones are steady. They have the 24-hour clock. They're ruled by the sun, and we are ruled by the moon. We change, we flow, we flux, like, pretty regularly. And we can be like 4 different women each month, which is pretty dope, to be honest, if you ask me. And then not only that, but throughout life, as we go through these different rites of passage, you know, it changes us. Like, we change when we become a mother, or when we experience loss, or when we start our period, or when we go through perimenopause and menopause. And one of the things that I have seen spoken about with these archetypes is, and these blood rites, these kind of rites of passage, you know, your first menstrual cycle, your first time having sex, your first childbirth, or every childbirth or child loss, menopause, etc., is that if those rites of passage are somehow like broken or traumatic, or aren't you aren't seen through them with honor, then there's kind of like a loss there and a damaging. And if there's like a trauma or a lack of respect from others towards you, or from you towards yourself in these rites of passage, then it kind of damages our journey of reconciling with ourselves in womanhood, you know? So for instance, I, for whatever reason, like really struggled with the whole like period talk, learning about periods, like learning, which is so funny because now I just like, I love it and I talk about it all the time. But like, I really did not want to talk about it. I didn't want to think about it. I didn't want to think about becoming a woman. I didn't want to think about growing boobs, having babies. Like, ick. I was chosen to be Mary in the church play one year for Christmas, and I turned down the role because I was so embarrassed at the thought of having to act like a pregnant woman, because that means that that woman would have had sex, and that's so icky and so embarrassing, and I didn't want to do that. And so I turned down the role and I gave it to somebody else, and I've regretted it ever since, because Mary, that's like peak, you know? But I was just embarrassed. I was embarrassed by all these like basic womanly things, especially in that kind of rite of passage from like child to woman. I remember when I got my first period, I didn't tell anybody about it. I didn't tell my mom, I didn't tell my sisters, and like I was just kind of like muddling through on my own without the right tools, you know? And my mom, she like discovered, you know, she figured it out, because of course she did. And she came to me and she's like, so you started your period? And I was like, Mom, go away, I like don't want to talk about this. And then my sister, she like found out, she got so excited, and then she told her friends. She was like a few years older than me, so they were all kind of like, 15, 16, I don't know, I can't remember even how old I was. Like I didn't really like, I think I just like blocked it off in my brain. I think I was probably like 12, or I was probably like 13. And I remember my sister's friends coming up to me after church on Sunday and be like, oh my gosh, Rebecca, I heard you started your period. And I was like, shut up, guys. Like, Kevin, why didn't you tell them? And I was so embarrassed. I don't know why. I was so embarrassed about it for a really long time. And I also like really struggled for a long time with the idea of like womanliness and girliness and womanhood. And I didn't want to wear pink or do anything too girly. And I just really struggled to like accept that side of me. Maybe I saw it as weak, or I saw it as like lesser than, or not cool, or like, which I think we do. I think that society has really done a good job of making us feel like women are inferior, are weaker, our emotions are like silly and dramatic, and all of those things. And I feel that when these rites of passage are honored well, it helps us through these transitions with grace, rather than kind of like like abruptly landing in a completely new version of ourselves. We're kind of ushered through it gently. And I think so is childbirth very much. And I think this is one that for many people is obviously like traumatic and unsupported. And then you go into postpartum and this new version of yourself kind of like so aggressively. And so many people in our culture, at least in the West, don't recognize it, don't understand it, don't honor that. Like there's this whole concept of matrescence, right? Which is like the secondary adolescence when you become a mom, because everything is changing. Not only are your hormones changing, but like your very self is changing. There's so much evidence that your brain is literally rewiring, it's actually becoming a parent, mother or father, is one of the like biggest, one of the times in your life of the biggest amount of brain like growth and new connections made in your brain. And this is actually true whether it's a biological child or not. If you take on any kind of like major caring role for a child that is consistent, then your brain starts to like grow and rewire in so much more empathy, so much more nurturing, and the way that it kind of protects and sees threats, and the way that it kind of organizes priorities, and everything. It's insane. There's like research on it, on the way that like your brain is literally firing off new things. And it's also one of the easiest times to rewire old connections in your brain, making it a great time to heal from past traumas, but also a kind of difficult time, because anytime that rewiring is happening in your brain, triggers tend to start coming up and traumas tend to start coming up. And if you aren't like in a peaceful environment, in like a safe space, if you haven't been ushered through this transition with like honor and grace and support, then it's going to be really hard to not only be postpartum and hormonal and looking after baby and whatever, but also to begin like rewiring your brain into motherhood. It's really challenging. And I think that a lot of women are alone in that. And we're just kind of like, we go through like a car crash of childbirth and postpartum with like very little ushering, very little leading, very little understanding and support. And then it's kind of like we're dropped off in this brand new version of ourselves. Our brains are going crazy, our bodies are going crazy, and it's kind of like, hope you're good. How's the baby? Oh, had your 6-week appointment. You're good to have sex again. And then you're just kind of like left there. And I think that's the case for a lot of women. I think for me, it was not 100% the case, because I have a really supportive system around me. My mom is like Miss Birth, right? She birthed 7 kids, I think 5 of which at home. And I have older sisters who have gone through it before, and kind of supported me through that process. My mom wasn't around me. She wasn't living near me. She wasn't with me during labor and childbirth. But she came to me soon after, when Kenzo was just a couple of weeks old. And so I had that support. I had knowledge. I had a place to start with, like, looking into like childbirth and postpartum and all of these things. And I had like a framework already for like, hey, you're going to need to really care for yourself and take it slow. Everyone was telling my husband, hey, you have to care for her. Like, don't let her walk around. Put her in a wheelchair. We were in NICU with my son for 2 weeks. And everyone was like, do not let her walk around that hospital. You put her in a wheelchair. And so he did. But we saw all of these other moms, like clearly having just given birth, just like walking around this giant hospital. And it was heartbreaking, honestly, to know that like I had this kind of support and so many mothers don't. And I think that that's one of the things that makes that Maiden-to-Mother transition like really challenging. Just like a lack of preparation and a lack of support for it. So imagine you go through this major transition, and again, it might not be childbirth. It might be something else. It might not be into like biological motherhood. It might be something else. You go through this major transition. You're dropped off in this new version of yourself. And let's say you have a child to care for and you're trying to learn to do that, and for the first time, like for me, for the first time in my life, I wasn't like working at least one or more jobs, and I was just like home with a baby. And there is this very real mourning of the you that was before, of the maiden, of this kind of picture of innocence and freedom and like your whole life laid out before you can do anything, and a kind of like lightheartedness that I think like very abruptly disappears, at least for a while, not forever. As you see in the archetypes, there's archetypes down the road, like the Amazon, newfound freedom in her, vitality grows and she's independent and wild and exploring and whatever. But when you're in this like mother phase, suddenly like all of your energy is in this bringing forth of life and pouring yourself into something else and pouring out of yourself, and so much is demanded of you, and it's almost like forced upon you, like this sudden change, and your whole world rewires to have a different center. And that's actually really, it can be really challenging, especially if you're not prepared for it. And so you have to go through the season of mourning this version of you that does not exist anymore. She doesn't. She's completely gone. And that's okay. A new version of you will emerge, beautiful, and delightful in her own ways, but you kind of have to let go of this old one. And this is where I feel like that passage of pregnancy and childbirth helps to prepare you for motherhood. Motherhood is so full of things out of your own control, so full of change, like so consistent change. Like just as soon as you think that you figured out the baby's schedule and the flow, like it changes. There's a sleep regression. Something new is happening. There is so much sacrifice of your own time, your own desires, your own needs, your own schedule. And again, all of that kind of comes back in its own way in time. But for a while, it's like all up in the air. And one of the biggest things that I learned in early motherhood, and I'm still learning in new ways all the time, is the idea of surrender. And again, this weaves itself through all of womanhood as well. You see it in the learning to find peace with your cycle and the way that your hormones change and flow throughout the month and having a period. I fought that for so long, and when I was fighting it and trying to be consistent and trying to not have down days and trying to like force this kind of constant forward motion energy that is very masculine, I struggled and I hated it, and I hated my period, and I had horrible periods. And I started finding peace with my cycle partially through cycle syncing and healing foods and all that, like eating for your hormones and all of that. But I truly think the most transformational thing in like even like my physical cycle, because it used to be rough. Like I had horrible PMDD, so every month before my period, I just wanted to die. I wanted to go crazy. I thought like I wanted to change my whole life. I wanted to just like burn the world down, basically. And then I had horrible, painful periods that had me like missing work, throwing up, like couldn't sleep, you know. And I truly think one of the biggest transformations in that was just the mindset of acceptance and recognizing the beauty in the cycle every month, and these different kind of phases of like the spring where you have so much energy, and then the summer of ovulation where you're like inspired and creative and sensual, and then the fall of the luteal phase where you can like be more intuitive and into the home and creativity and all that. And then the menstrual phase is actually like so powerful. You have like incredible connection between the hemispheres of your brain during that phase, and it's a really great time for like inward looking and future planning and stuff. And so similarly, on a bigger scale, when we begin to like accept the waves that are womanhood and the waves that are motherhood, the seasons that we go through, suddenly it's not such a burden anymore. And with motherhood, especially if you think about the early days of babyhood, when babies are like cry, sometimes they just cry, and when like sleep is messed up, sometimes it's just messed up. Like they're just not. I can't do the cry it out method. I don't like it. I don't agree with it personally. I don't hate you if you do it, but like I can't do it. And so they're not gonna sleep through the night. They're not gonna always sleep consistently. And the days that I've had the worst time with motherhood is when I have had a schedule. I have had a desire that is like, I need to do this thing and I need to do it in this way and I need to do it at this time. And if they don't get to sleep now, then what am I going to do? If they don't do this, then what am I going to do? You know, and that's when motherhood gets really challenging. That's when I feel like rage building up in me. And like, oh, I wish I wasn't a mom. I don't wish I wasn't a mom. I love being a mom. Unfortunately, when you're working at a mom, you can't always just like completely easy breezy flow with everything, but there's an aspect to which you can. And there's so many times when I am just trying to force my own schedule, my own ideas of how things are supposed to be and how the day's supposed to play out, when I am trying to be the maiden still, and I'm not her anymore. And that's when I get frustrated and angry and feel like jaded or bitter in motherhood. And the more that I'm able to let go of that and just like know that, hey, like this is a journey. It comes in seasons and waves and ebbs and flows, and I just need to kind of like ride it out. Then motherhood starts to transform me, right? That's when I begin to like learn release. I begin to learn presence, which has always been hard for me. Just like being present in the moment now. Like when I'm nursing my baby sometimes and I'm like, oh, there's other things that I need to be doing. There's other things that I want to be doing. And I get all frustrated and then I take a beat and I look down at him and he's not going to be this small forever and he needs me. This is like my biggest, most important job, my most important role right now. He needs me. And I take a moment to like recenter into that and then it's beautiful again, you know? And truly, I think that surrender is one of the most transformative things about motherhood, is one of the things that has most like changed my life. That and living for somebody other than yourself. I think that I just had a really hard time finding good reasons to like make good choices and to even call my life worth living before I was a mother. I struggled a lot with like anxiety and depression. And yeah, I knew God and I trusted him, or I thought I did. And I would say that I knew that I had a purpose and all of that, but it just felt very empty. And even though now I would say that I wouldn't say that like my only purpose is to be a mom. Like I think that there's more that I want to do. There's more than that in me and in my life. Like as soon as I was pregnant, I was like, oh my gosh, there is a whole other person inside of me. I need to start treating my body well. And a lot of it was like mental, like telling myself positive truths over and over and over again, stopping the mental chatter, because half of my mental chatter, like my negative self-talk, was out loud. And I was like, I can't have a baby, a kid, a child listening to me saying this kind of negative stuff about myself. It's going to end up being their narrative, you know? And so that work for me really started like when I became pregnant, and I had that 9 months of kind of that work on my inner self. And then birth comes along. And I can talk about birth in another podcast because this is already getting very long. But birth to me is like this portal of surrender. And the more that you surrender and release, there's physical things that happen where when you are able to relax, when you're particularly able to release fear, your muscles relax and open easier. So as soon as there's fear present in your body, or like worry or anxiety, your muscles actually tense up, even ones that you can't notice, but like a lot that you can notice too, like in your face and in your arms and your legs and then your womb, and it all tenses up and it will stop the work of childbirth from doing what it needs to do, because your body does it automatically. Like your body is automatically like contracting muscles and moving muscles aside, and the muscles of your uterus, the muscles of your uterus during childbirth move and come up and then start to push down on the baby, and they just do that. And the more that you can kind of like just get out of your own body's way, it will enable it to just happen in a way that is like truly not bad. Like I wouldn't say like painless, but I would say that not horrific, not screaming in pain, not like terrible, not something I wouldn't want to do again. Something I would want to do again. Actually, like an incredible, like moving spiritual experience. And every time I would be going through like a particularly strong contraction as it got towards the end, I had my midwife or my husband just like reminding me to release and to open and to relax. And I said to my husband, if you see me holding tension, because I often do, like in my face and in my forehead and my shoulders, just like, can you just touch it? Touch that place to remind me to release it. And he did, you know, and I found that when I was able to release that tension, when I released the tension physically, then fear would come up. You know, some things were constantly coming up during contractions, and as soon as I was able to release them, as I did the work of like releasing fear, like giving it to God, like reminding myself of all the truths that like your body has this, you were made for this, like everything's gonna be fine. You know, all the true good thoughts, all of the mantras and the affirmations that I prepared myself with. Then it's like the pain would go away. There would be an ease that entered, and then before I knew it, the contraction was over and it was rest, you know? And I found that all the way through, particularly with Zimri's birth, all the way through to the end, to like the final moment of push, which like there was only one of, like I didn't push him out. My body just did it, you know? And I really found that lesson of release during childbirth, like such a picture of the release of motherhood and that kind of transition from the maiden to the mother. And the more that you fight it and hold on to kind of like this old version of yourself or this old version of your life that you're trying to like make your kid fit into or make your new self fit into, the more pain you're going to experience. The more that you can release into life and what it looks like now, even if there's upheaval in that, even if there's uncertainty, it's going to keep changing. It's not going to last for long, you know? Like, the baby stage doesn't last for long. The toddler stage doesn't last for long. It feels like a lot when you're in it, but like you look back and it goes so fast. And I am still learning this act of surrender, and I still find myself clenching at times and then getting frustrated, you know? And so when we can let go of that in its time and begin to embrace our own intuition, our own inner power, even in life's ups and downs, that woman's intuition is really powerful. And I think it is put through its paces in motherhood and early childhood rearing years, or again, even the mothering of ideas and bringing forth things. Like, it doesn't have to be children, but this idea that we are all in one form or another the creatrix. And when we come to this phase of life of wanting to bring something forward, to birth something, whether it's an idea or a business or whatever it is, doing so in a way that is feminine, that is releasing, that is open to the waves of life and the ebbs and flows, that is open to and led by your intuition and to change and to doing things differently and doing things in a way that serves yourself and serves your family or your business, your idea or whatever best, is a really powerful tool for growth and like self-actualization. I have to close up soon because it's almost dinner time and I can sense the need for me growing inside the house. But a couple of final things. So my advice for women becoming mothers, for one, open yourself up to the waves and to the seasons and to release. Practice release. Practice letting go. Practice floating. For two, you gotta put gas in your tank. And like, this seems like really cheesy. When I was young, I drove my tank to empty all the time, but it was literally out of necessity because I didn't have any money and I was just a little bit crazy. And so I would be like coasting down hills, just like praying that I made it to the gas station so I could put my little few pieces of change into the tank and then like get to my next destination. But I have had money for gas for years. Tell me why I have not been just like filling my tank up. I know exactly why. It's because I feel like I'm in a rush. I feel like I don't have the time, or I just can't be bothered to stand there and wait, or there's like this leftover like poverty mentality that's like, I don't know, I just shouldn't fill my tank up, only put $20 in, save a bit of cash. It's not saving cash. I'm gonna need the gas now or later at some point. Anyways, I recently started filling my gas tank all the way, and I was like, you know what? This is the marker of a new era for me. not only practically, because like this just makes sense if I'm gonna be like a well-prepared woman, also mother who's carting her children around, but also like I feel like it's a little symbol of a shift in my mentality to just taking the extra time and the extra care to like pour into myself, even if it means that I'm like a little bit late. Like half the time, the reason I don't fill up my gas tank is because I think that is because I'm running late. And realistically, what's the difference? It's another like 2 minutes of standing there filling up your tank. As if that's gonna make much difference if I'm already 10 minutes late. Like, no, it's not. Just fill up your damn tank, woman. And this is definitely something that I'm learning in motherhood. Like, there's just like you have to take the moments when you can. You don't always like you can't always count on like, oh, I'll stay up really late tonight and then tomorrow I'll sleep in. You don't have that option. It's not really like dependent on you. So when you have the time, when you have a moment to yourself, like what are you going to choose to do in that moment? How are you going to choose to fill yourself up? Be wise and fill up your tank well and fill it up before it's like super super empty, so that when it's needed of you, because it could be at the drop of a hat, like there could be more needed of you because like your child is sick or going through an emotional moment, or like there's just some need on your energy, so that you are full and taken care of in that moment whenever the need may present itself. And then my final piece of advice for people coming into motherhood or coming into the season of motherhood is to nurture your creativity. And I am struggling and trying with this. I used to be, well, I am so creative. I believe everybody's creative. And I definitely, especially believe that women are creative, and it just like manifests itself in different ways. Baby Zimri has entered the chat. What was I saying? So, my creativity used to manifest itself in like staying up all night painting all over my walls and like I took like theater and dance and photography and art in school, and I was in a theater company, and I was like constantly I was wearing crazy clothes and doing, like all the like outward expressions of like classic creativity and artistry. And through life a lot of that got kind of like pushed to the side when I got into more some phases of more like intense addiction or substance use or like bad relationships that just like sucked the life out of me. And I was often like fighting to regain this creativity, and I went through phases of it. But after I became a mom, it felt like a necessary lifeline that I had lost, that I just had to get back. And I kept trying to get it back in the ways that I had done it before. And that was a real struggle because I was used to just like setting up an easel in my room and leaving it there and letting it be messy and, whatever. And I couldn't do that anymore. And so I had to find new ways of entering into that creative flow. And for me, it was through cooking and through creating, like making videos and TikTok. Like it was one of the big things that sparked my TikTok, love, my joy in like content creation. Was it was a way that I could enter into that creative flow state without having to have a lot of setup and a lot of different things at hand that like a baby could grab and spill and make mess with. And the more that I kind of cultivated trying to define just those little moments of creativity, or even just like just getting just like a 10-minute sketch, like a putting on a song and just like dancing really weird for 5 minutes, just like those little snippets of it to just like hold on to like move through my energy to like get the stuck energy out of me. um it felt so good. And the more that I started to do that, the more that it kind of began to snowball. And it's still something that I'm kind of like struggling with the balance of, because there's still ways that I want to be creative that I'm like, how do I do this? Like, I have a billion unfinished projects at any given time. I I still want to paint and write and create in a billion ways that I know I'm just not able right now in this season, but I look for ways to tap into creativity and to tap into a flow state throughout my days. And the more that I'm able, the easier I feel, and the more of that tension of like the struggle of this season is released. And sometimes it really just looks like going outside with the kids and putting on music and bubbles and taking out my hoop and just like messing around for a little bit. And sometimes it comes out in the way that I play with my kids. Like I struggle sometimes with like imaginative play now as an adult, but like Sometimes when I'm like, you know what, screw it. Like, I know this isn't what I want to be doing right now, but this is what I'm doing. Let's just like get into it. And then I really get into imaginative play with them. And that is so fun. And it's a beautiful way of like expressing creativity and teaching it to your children and teaching them imagination, in like crafts that I do with them, or like things that I make for their birthdays, and I know that it's just a season of that, and that the more that I'm able to cultivate it now, the more that I'll be able to find it again once they're a little bit older. And it's really been a lifeline for me. And I think that a lot of people, I have friends who are finding creativity for the first time in motherhood because they're doing crafts and things with their kids, and they're like, oh my gosh, wait, I like actually forgot that I really love crafting and I'm good at it, and I am just having a blast, So those are my little pieces of advice. Surrender to the waves. Learn how to float. Wait, not learn how to float. Let yourself float. Your body floats. Just like spread it wide, Float. Gas. Put gas in your tank when you can. When you can, just fill it up, You might have to learn some new ways of doing it, but fill up your tank. And creativity. Find new ways, if need be, to drop into the flow state, because that will move the stuck energy, the frustration, any kind of uncertainty through you. And all of those things will help you to tap into your intuition, which will see you through the days of motherhood and will do the work in you of developing your character, your storyline, your character arc, so that one day you can be the crone, one day you can be the wise woman that looks back on her life with shining eyes and with excitement and with love. And do you see the mosquito floating right around the lens? Tapping into that intuitive inner self that will guide you through these seasons of life. And I'm just on the journey too. I haven't figured it out yet. I'm just learning. I will put any of the resources that I spoke about in the show notes, wherever they are. My brother helps me with the podcast, so I don't really know what that looks like. But the couple books that I referenced, and the information about the archetypes. And if you're a member of my Patreon and you're watching this unabridged, I would love to hear in the comments, like, what do you want me to talk about next? What would you like my next podcast to be about? Do you have any questions? Do you have any people that you would like me to talk with? If you're watching this on YouTube and you can comment, I would love to hear your experiences with motherhood or with the archetypes, with these transitions into different seasons, and what has helped you find ease through those transitions. I'm going to go inside and begin the bedtime, the witching hour. And hopefully remember some of the things that I talked about in this podcast to take me through that time. Anyways, thank you for being here. Thank you for being part of the village. Remember that you have something to offer, even if you don't see it yourself. And that for somebody, you are an integral part of their village. I can't wait to meet you here again next time. Please let me know what you thought about my solo podcast and what should I talk about next.